Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the QUADRISE Fuels International PLC Update Meeting Investor Presentation. Throughout this presentation, investors will be in listen-only mode. Questions are encouraged and can be submitted at any time via the Q&A tab situated in the right-hand corner of your screen. Simply type in your question and press send. And due to the number of attendees we have on the meeting today, please appreciate the company may not be able to answer every question it receives during the meeting itself. The company will review, of course, all questions submitted and publish responses where it's appropriate to do so. These will be available via your Investor Meet company dashboard, and you'll be notified when these are ready for your review. I'd also like to remind you that this presentation is being recorded. Before we begin, we'd like to submit the following poll. I'd now like to hand you over to Mike Kirk, Chairman, Jason Miles, CEO of QUADRISE Fuels International PLC. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Paul. Thank you very much. Can I just say welcome to everyone. It's a real pleasure to be able to present to you today. What we're trying to do today is actually give you exactly the same presentation that Jason and I gave to institutional investors the week before last. In total, we gave about 30 presentations. Each one of them was done in under the hour, so we probably are going to be sticking to an hour today. But as I hope you'll have seen from our previous use of Investor Meet Company, we do provide absolutely comprehensive answers to questions that we don't get the chance to reflect on during the course of the actual live webinar itself. And the only difference between the presentation today and the one that we gave to institutions is we are assuming that most of you are pretty familiar with us as a company, so we're not going to go through the animated video. And obviously some of the information relating to the funding is now in the past tense, as we've successfully raised the £6 million through the placing. But we are absolutely delighted to be able to talk to you today. We'll also give you a bit of feedback as to where we found that sort of real resonance with institutional investors as we went through things. But we'll go through this as quickly as we can, then get to the position of being able to answer your questions. We've already had a load of those submitted to us, but we'll also expect to get quite a few as we're going through the course of this. So just very briefly, just a bit of background about us as a business, how we're solving a heavy oil problem, and importantly, we're solving that now, how we're going to enable a cleaner energy transition, and how our global activities and our unique business model enables us to very rapidly deploy once we've actually successfully concluded trials, and how we're going to use that funding to actually deliver value to you, our shareholders. The main issue surrounding heavy oil is oversupply, and this has actually been exacerbated by the impact of two things. One, the pandemic and the reduction in overall demand, but two, those IMO regulations that came in just over 14 months ago now, which gave a significant shift from heavy fuel oil to lower sulfur marine gas oil. You've then got the issue that for producers of heavy fuel oil, it's actually uneconomic. It costs them money to do it effectively. They're selling a product at less than crude. So it gives them an opportunity to really improve their profitability. And secondly, once they've actually produced this oil that they've then had to sell at a loss, it's not a great fuel, actually. It's quite difficult to burn. It gives lots of problems in terms of combustion products, and it's quite difficult to handle. You still need to store it and use at elevated temperatures. And what our solution does is get rid of all of those issues. And we're talking here about MSAR in particular. What it does, it enables through the use of water instead of those expensive distillates, that oversupply to be reduced. It also enables very effectively and quickly an effective upgrading program for that refinery so that they're getting more value out of each barrel of oil that they produce, because they can actually sell all of those distillates as premium fuels and don't have to use a substantial proportion of them to actually dilute down the residues to sell the HFO. And the unique way in which it's manufactured with the pre-atomization means you actually create a fuel that is much more like a gas. So it burns much more cleanly and gives significant reductions in a number of important emission areas. I'm not going to go through the presentation in terms of the animated video. For those who are not familiar with us, it is available on our website, and I'd absolutely recommend that you go and have a look at that. And this is an area that we are really excited about, and actually I think it's an area that our new investors are really excited about, and that's bio-MSAR. So we launched this at the back end of last year. It's got patent pending technology, which is enabling us to blend in glycerin with water and the additive package to create a renewable biofuel, bio-MSAR. And why is this important? Well, we think it's important for a number of reasons. One is it significantly reduces CO2. So we can actually get a product that is equivalent to a consumer switching from heavy fuel oil to LNG or gas, but without any of the huge costs involved in changing over to those infrastructures. So we really do think this is a game changer, not just for us as a business, but for industry as well. We're a small business, but we've actually got, we think, a great leadership team. We've got the relevant experience in all the areas that are important to us. And we'll come on to this when we've seen a couple of the questions about how we scale this business up. I think one of the areas that we'll come on and tell you about in response to Q&As is that whilst we've got a very strong team, the way that our business operates means it is very scalable through using external resources, and we've already very successfully done that in a number of areas. We've got compelling IP, and that's not just in relation to MSAR, now it's bio-MSAR. That has also been jointly patent pending, protected through our relationship with Nouryon. That relationship with Nouryon has continued to grow and strengthen, and they will stand behind us in terms of any patent infringement, but importantly, they also stand behind us in being a world-class supplier to enable us to move from our existing trials and tests through to commercial supply, and giving our clients the comfort that they know they've got behind us a world-class supplier of the important additive packages. Then just before I hand over to Jason, I just wanted to really outline one further area, and that's clearly ESG has been of huge importance in the marketplace overall. And again, this was something that we feel resonated really strongly. I'm not going to talk about the S and G here. I think we've put our case very strongly on that. And I'm just going to leave a bit of a teaser here because Jason's going to tell you more about this. But we think with both MSAR and bio-MSAR, we've got two real winning products out here. We've got one which currently will enable any user to make sure that they are using fossil fuels in the absolutely most effective and efficient way, minimizing any emissions. And in the case of a heavy oil upgrade for a refinery, it is absolutely the cheapest, the quickest, and the most CO2 and energy efficient way of doing that upgrading. But with bio-MSAR, we take that a real step further with the aim of being able to not just significantly reduce to around 20 to 30% CO2 emissions, but actually progressing that to be a carbon neutral fuel over time. I think with that, I'm going to hand over now to Jason to take you through the rest of the presentation. I'll come back towards the end, and then we'll be delighted to move through to Q&A.
Thank you, Mike. So this slide just presents a typical example of a project as we would perceive it. The scale of this project is the equivalent to supplying a 400 megawatt boiler with MSAR, or supplying about 21 large container ships, which is equivalent to about 12,000 barrels a day of fuel oil demand. Obviously, for producers, bottom left box, it's important that they make money. And as Mike mentioned before, the producers are typically oil refineries or heavy oil producers in certain cases where they're saving money on distillates. So that's really where the value of MSAR is created. But the idea is that that value is split equally between the two parties, the producers and the consumers. So from the producer side, obviously there's a margin that they make in terms of the uplift, depending on how heavy the oil is. That gives you a range of benefits there. And it's important in terms of the underpinning of our business is that the benefits very quickly pay off for the capital costs. The nature of MSAR and MSAR retrofits are that they're relatively simple to do. We design a fuel, we make a fuel that's essentially very stable. So it means that the existing fuel oil infrastructure can be utilized. And as such, then the capital cost is really limited to the MSAR blending equipment and tie-ins. And then essentially everything else is already there. So the payback is very quick for the investment that's made, but also importantly, in a very obviously in a changing world at the moment, certainly during the last 12 months, it's important to be able to deploy the technology very quickly as well. A lot of long-term decisions, are very hard to justify, especially in the downstream space. So, where we are is that we've got a very quick and easy means of refineries making money, and also for the end consumer, for them, it's a cheaper energy source. The green box at the top is extremely important because environmental pressures on all companies now are becoming very, very high, and that's really accelerated, I guess, interest in MSAR and bio-MSAR going forward, as Mike mentioned. I mean, it's important though to stress that we see our business as very profitable. The business models that we are focusing on at the moment are on the licensing and tolling basis, where essentially a project of this scale for us is a game changer. Those shareholders that have looked at our finances will know that our annual costs are around sort of £3 million a year. So one such project that makes us cash generative very, very quickly. This is the focus of the fundraise, is really to deliver one or more of the projects that we're working on at the moment. So in terms of how we access the market, we use a range of different agents and companies, ranging from sort of single individuals such as Yunus Mamar in Morocco, through to fairly large entities such as JGC in Japan, and Freepoint Commodities in the Americas, who are sort of fairly large entities in themselves. So we also deal directly as well with various different companies. So we have a range of approaches to really access the global market that we address, and that's been extremely important, especially during obviously the last year when it's been difficult to get on a plane. Focusing on the three main projects in this slide are really, this slide is designed to sort of give you a summary of what we're doing, and to some extent an explanation of how these projects are interlinked. So Greenfield Energy, top left, is a project which is an upstream application for MSAR, where you've got a very heavy oil, which is actually sweet. So it meets the IMO regulations for 0.5 sulfur. So potentially it can be utilized as a marine fuel. So initially the application for MSAR is to look at the conventional MSAR supply to enable a low sulfur MSAR for either marine or power applications. But in the future, we also see there's an opportunity for bio-MSAR production as well in Utah. Coming to the bottom of the map, we're also doing a project in Morocco with a very large international mining and chemicals group, the largest consumer of fuel oil actually in Morocco, where they utilise the fuel for drying and calcining operations. And then we have the recently announced deal with MSC Container Shipping, where they are looking to deploy MSAR and in the future also bio-MSAR as a means to sort of reduce their energy costs and improve their environmental performance as well. So three main projects that we're focusing on. Each of these require potentially, well, certainly two of them require production. So potentially we need a refinery, sign a refinery deal in the Mediterranean in the near future to supply both MSC and Morocco. But then to really service the marine market, then you're looking at the larger hubs in ARA, which is Amsterdam, Rotterdam, and Antwerp, or in Singapore as well. And then the nature of those opportunities are that that provides a commercial flow of MSAR and bio-MSAR into the marketplace, and additionally, it sort of serves to cement the commercial rollout of MSAR for the larger players, the national oil companies in both Saudi Arabia and the Americas, in Ecuador and Mexico as well, where there's very large applications for MSAR in the power generation sector. Albeit they're fairly, the nature of these types of opportunities in those regions are that they tend to be followers rather than leaders. So we're working on a number of obviously projects in parallel, but focusing really on the main top three in the map to really use as a springboard for the other activities, which we've done a lot of groundwork in already, which some of you shareholders already know. So focusing in a bit more detail in terms of the roadmap for each of these top 3 projects, as well as BioMSAR. So with Morocco, essentially where we are is we carried out a pilot trial in October last year, my last business trip, sadly. Although I'll look on it fondly now and wish I can get back there very soon. But we carried out a pilot trial which was successfully completed in October, and that really then essentially opened up the opportunity to do an industrial trial in one of their satellite facilities. It's a facility where you can see the picture bottom right of the slide, where you can see a very large kiln, which is used for production of one of their products. They've got 7 of these kilns in there, particularly this facility, and that's a large consumer of fuel oil and available at sort of fairly short notice to carry out a trial. So that's the first step, is to complete that trial, industrial trial, in Q2 most likely now, and then that will then lead to then a commercial trial in the main facility, which you can see top right, where they use the fuel for drying. And then between those 2 applications, essentially you have a very large, basically that provides the demonstration needed to cover the majority of the fuel use by that particular client. And what we're planning to do is utilize the equipment that we're supplying for the industrial trial that we manufacture in QRF. Can be also utilised for the commercial trial. So we're obviously looking to try and reduce the time needed to actually deliver the trials as much as possible. So where we are is the preparations for the trial are underway. We're looking to produce the fuel needed for the trial sort of early part of Q2, complete the industrial trial, and then move on to the commercial trial, and then conclude the supply agreement second half of the year. Coming on to Utah, as some of you will know, this opportunity is a joint venture between AIM-listed Tomco Energy and a US company, Valcor. They are essentially utilizing, or they've licensed a technology that's supplied by a company called, a facility called Petrotech, where they have a very environmentally beneficial solution to essentially processing the oil sands, where really it's essentially a remediation play as much as an oil play, where they can essentially take the oil sands, extract the oil in a very low energy means of extraction, and then actually return the sand as well, in a form which is saleable. So it's a very clever technology. It's being deployed. Why is MSAR involved? Well, MSAR, the oil that's extracted is very heavy, and MSAR is a very low cost means of actually getting this material to market. Obviously, one of the opportunities is in the IMO, the IMO marine fuel compliance space, and our project with MSC is obviously, and our client MSC is a potential opportunity to get this material to market, as are some other power applications as well. So where we are is they started up that facility slightly later than expected in January of this year. They've just been completing the commissioning phase, as far as we understand, are in the process of compiling samples which we hope to get sent across to the UK in the near future. So we're waiting to hear from Greenfield, but we expect we'll get samples underway, and then the idea is that we'll basically then be converting that material to MSAR in our lab, for which we get paid, and then that will lead to the commercial demonstration. Later in the year, obviously, as that progresses, then we'll be looking to obviously sign off licensing agreements, and then supply equipment to service that particular contract. And then with MSC, some of you will probably have seen the announcement already that we made in January. But essentially, where we are with MSC is we're taking off where we left up with Maersk. We had a number of very successful trials with Maersk, where unfortunately at the time they decided not to progress with MSAR because they were focusing on low sulfur fuel. at the time, and that then basically sort of focused us to look at the people in the marine space who were putting companies in the marine space who were putting exhaust gas cleaning systems, or scrubbers, as they're colloquially termed in the industry, onto their ships. And what these systems do is they take the exhaust gas from the diesel engines, and they remove the sulfur and some of the other particulate matter as well from the exhaust gases before they're emitted to the atmosphere. That's an alternative to utilize. I mean, that means they can utilize a lower cost, high sulfur fuel, as opposed to a higher cost, sort of low sulfur fuel. So it means that they can utilize. They're quite adaptable in terms of the fuel that they can use, and that's why we focused on those types of companies. So MSC is the largest adopter of these exhaust gas cleaning systems in their fleet. But virtually all of their their cruise liners are converted, and about 40% of their container ships have put these scrubbing devices on board their ships. So that means it's a very sort of they've already made a strong investment in environmental technology, and they're early adopters as well, which is quite key, both for us. We need a client that's willing to look at new things. And I would say that what's changed in the last few years for us is that the marine industry has become a lot more innovative in looking at they've had to be, in terms of trying to meet the IMO changes that happened at the beginning of 2020, but also there's lots of new new pressures on the industry to decarbonize, and as such MSC are early adopters of biofuels, as an example, and obviously see BioMSAR as a lower cost means of meeting some of those regulations. And with BioMSAR, as Mike mentioned earlier, we are very excited about this because of its obviously it's the ability to reduce CO2 emissions, and ideally, for us, to become essentially sort of net zero by 2030 is our aim. To come up with a fully renewable solution for MSAR going forward, offers a great growth opportunity for the company. So what we've achieved in a very, very short time in 2020, really from sort of a concept to actual, commercial demonstrations this year, is pretty amazing for a small company. It's really utilizing a biofuel product or waste, really, from the biofuel process, such that glycerin comes, most of the glycerin in the world comes from production of biodiesel, where for every 9 barrels of biodiesel you get through transesterification, you get a barrel of renewable glycerin as a result. That glycerin, crude glycerin, needs to go through a cleaning process, but once it does, it's essentially a very, very good fuel. But it's water soluble, so it means that it's not really utilized in the oil space at all at the moment. But for MSAR, it's great because we're a water-based fuel, as Mike mentioned before. Our technology is making an oil in water emulsion. So we're utilizing the glycerin to displace the hydrocarbon and quite a bit of the water, to end up with a fuel that, for all intents and purposes, looks and behaves much like, essentially identically to MSAR, and is actually fully fungible with MSAR as well. So it means that for our clients, they can convert to MSAR initially, and then obviously as BioMSAR becomes available, and they need to adapt to decarbonize, then the BioMSAR is a very low cost means of essentially transitioning them to a net zero world. So we patented the technology at the end of last year, jointly with Neurion. Some of our existing patents already were applicable anyway, but we've sort of further cemented our IP position as well, together with Neurion. And where we are essentially with this particular program is that we've done some initial testing with a UK company called Aquafuel, very, very interesting, innovative company, who really were the pioneers and have IP with regards to operating diesel engines on 100% glycerin. So there's certain things you have to do to run on glycerin, and these guys are experts in it. So, it's obvious for us to collaborate together. We purchased an engine, so that's QUADRISE's engine you see bottom left, which is a small high-speed Cummins generator that you can buy off the shelf. Not designed to run on heavy fuel, it's designed to run on diesel. So I probably wouldn't run on heavy fuel actually, although we haven't tried that, but it runs extremely well on bio-MSAR. We did some testing at the beginning of the year, which I think surprised everybody how well it worked. So we got very good NOx reductions and some interesting increases in efficiency as well compared to diesel. And that's interesting because when you run on conventional biofuels, what normally happens is actually compared to marine fuel, the NOx emissions normally go up by 15%. With bio-MSAR, we're seeing a reduction of about 20 to 25%, and that's the first testing that's been done. So we think we can probably achieve better than that. So we get substantially lower NOx emissions, but also because we're using renewable glycerin and it's considered a waste. Even after treatment, we expect the cost of bio-MSAR to be in the range of sort of 2 to 3 times maximum the cost of marine fuel. Why is that important? Well, if you look at the cost of biofuel compared to marine fuel today, it's about 6 times more expensive. So we think bio-MSAR has got a great place going forward for our clients as a low-cost means of decarbonising, which is very competitive versus conventional biofuel. So again, extremely interesting. We are doing some further testing this year in Q2 with VTT and Wärtsilä. This is on the medium speed engines, which are typically utilised on the cruise ships and in some sort of short haul ferries as well. So our large application, obviously MSC cruise lines is one opportunity there, which we are developing as well. And then together with Aquafuel and some other clients in the biofuel space as well, we are looking at obviously glycerin production and glycerin refining essentially for our projects, as well as new opportunities for glycerin production via algal means as well. So we're looking at other opportunities for glycerin manufacture outside of the conventional space today, because obviously as demand requires it, we will need more beyond the sort of 5 or so million tons a year that's available today in the world. But also we are spreading or pushing the envelope even further in terms of RDI as well, to look at other renewable fuels which are available, which are more abundant. And lignins is obviously up there, where that's already being looked at by certain companies, but they're not looking at it in the way that we are. So we are looking at incorporating renewable lignin as a means to essentially further decarbonise our fuel, such that the ultimate gain for us is to go for a fully net zero compliant solution utilising our technology. So exciting times, and we are very focused on not only the MSAR obviously work, but utilising the great technology that we've developed over the years to provide a really great sort of renewable solution as well.
Thanks, Jason. Just very briefly before we move on to the issue of the funding we've already obtained through the placing, and then the funding that we hope we will get provided during the conclusion of the open offer, I think it's really important just to emphasise we do really carefully look after the money that we have. We already took over some actions very early in calendar 2020 to further reduce our costs. Obviously, we had the benefit of not being able to spend money going out traveling to do our business development activities. That's only a benefit as long as we can still continue to do those business development activities. And that's where the outline that Jason provided to you on our network of agents and partners around the world has proved to be instrumental in that, because all of that work was able to be done either directly through ourselves using remote means, or through our partners, to ensure that we're in the position we are now to progress these 3 active projects together with the bio-MSAR testing and development. And then latterly, as we went into the early part of this year, we took the decision to take some final funding from Bergen to ensure that we got a longer tail of funding through the course of this calendar year that actually helped to underpin our ability to go out to potential institutional investors, as we did successfully over the last couple of weeks. And just in terms of, what funding did we seek? Well, when we went to see the institutional investors and they got exactly this same presentation, it was that we were looking to raise the funds to get us through all of the activities that Jason has just outlined to you. So taking all of those 3 projects, Morocco, Utah and MSC, from where they are now through to successful conclusion of the relevant trials and tests, and then starting to deliver commercial revenues from those. And our expectations are that by the end of June 2022, we've actually got to the position of not just having progressed to commercial revenues, but actually having those to be self-sustaining. So the business is actually generating cash flow from its operations at that point. So it doesn't need further funding other than funding that we might look to do for other exciting opportunities that come up, but we will have a business model which is self-sustaining by then. It's also enabling us to do some of the important work that we want to do with some of the big national oil companies that Jason also outlined there, where we think being able to engage with them on the back of successful commercial supply into any of the projects that we've been talking about will actually be fundamental to being able to get those over the line. And so just in summary, I hope that we've given you some clarity in terms of how we really are solving a heavy oil problem, and we're solving it now. We've got 2 great products in terms of MSAR and bio-MSAR, each of which can make a major contribution to reducing emissions and reducing greenhouse gases. We think there's some huge excitement that we've seen, not just from investors that we spoke to, but I think importantly, we've seen a lot of inbound interest in the business since we started talking about bio-MSAR, and also since we started talking about the success of the trials we're having with our customers in the marine, in the upstream, and in the industrial markets as well. We hope that those of you who are shareholders on this feel able to support us in the fundraise that we're going to be we're actively undertaking through the open offer, as the management team will be doing as well. And we're now going to close off the formal part of the presentation, go into the Q&A. So I'm going to hand back to Paul just for the moment then. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Jason. Ladies and gentlemen, do please continue to submit your questions using the Q&A tab situated on the right-hand corner of your screen. But just while the company take a few moments to review those investor questions submitted already, I'd like to remind you that recording of the presentation, along with a copy of the slides and the published Q&A, can be accessed via your investor dashboard on the Investor Meet Company platform. I'd also like to remind you that your feedback is important to the company, and immediately after the presentation has ended, you'll be redirected for the opportunity to provide your feedback in order that the company can better understand your views and expectations. Mike, Jason, I guess before we move on to some of the live Q&A, we had a number of questions pre-submitted by investors, and I think probably best just on the basis of time, if we could look to group those into sort of thematic responses. But if I could just hand back to you there, Mike, just to run through those.
Yeah, and if I'll take a couple of these first of all, and then I'm going to hand over to Jason to take through some of them. But I think some of them are surrounding the sort of rationale for how we did this fundraising. So one is, why did we use the cash box structure? Why didn't we go to a GM and seek shareholder approval? And that's basically, we think the cash box structure is well known in the marketplace if you don't happen to have disapplication rights. And the reason we don't have disapplication rights is those didn't get voted through at the AGM in 2020. We carefully considered this. We undertook extensive consultations with our major shareholders, which at that time amount to around 25+% of the shares in the business, who were fully supportive of us using the cash box structure. And part of the rationale for that is it was the one that we believed gave the best possible outcome. And that was in terms of being able to drive a really tight discount in terms of the placing, which we believe we've absolutely achieved. And also the fact that it isn't conditional means that we could actually push this out to a larger number of institutions. So overall, we're delighted. We think it was absolutely the right thing to do, but we only did it after ensuring that our major shareholders were fully supportive of the use of the cash box structure. And when it comes to those institutions, there are a couple of questions that came in about who they are. Well, we're not at liberty to actually disclose that, but what we can say is that a number of those institutions have been given significant sort of allocations, and we would expect that those would have disclosable interests. Those disclosable interests will have to be announced once they get their shares actually issued to them, which we believe is tomorrow. So you will actually see, we think, towards the back end of this week, notifications of at least two new large shareholders in the business, which we are delighted with, and we think you as retail shareholders will be delighted with as well. I think then there were a number that I'm going to hand over to Jason, which were around how are we going to use this money? Are we going to be buying more MMUs? So perhaps, Jason, if you could just sort of address that one, and then I'll come back on one other one as well.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. So there were some questions. The question came in with regards, it says basically, with regards to MMUs, how many do we have and where are they now? So we have basically two MMUs that we own. An MMU, sorry, is an MSAR manufacturing unit. These are the modular boxes you saw in one of the slides that Mike presented earlier. These production units are designed to produce up to 6,000 barrels a day of MSAR. So we have one in Spain in storage that's likely to be deployed for the marine program, and the other is in Denmark, having just been serviced, and that's prepared now, ready for shipment potentially to Utah. So we have two that we currently own, and then there's another follow-up question in terms of following the recent fundraising. Will any of the cash raised be used to purchase additional MMUs, and if so, where do you expect them to be deployed? Well, potentially, if MSAR demand requires another MMU, obviously we have the funds to expand our production capacity, but we have no orders ready to be placed as yet for additional MMUs. Obviously, that will be subject to signing further commercial agreements.
There have been a number. Sorry, Jason.
Go, keep going, Mike. Sorry.
Yeah, there've been a number relating to, have we given up on KSA? Why aren't we making progress there? And if I can basically sort of try and answer a couple of those, absolutely, we've not given up on KSA. There's a particular question as well that indicated, we've said in the circular, the reason for, we think one of the issues in KSA is the fact that those benefits don't accrue in the same way they do in an open market to the refiner and the consumer. And therefore, is it a contradiction for us to say that we think we can be successful in KSA on demonstrating commercial success in these other markets that we're operating in? No, because what we're talking about, those benefits are still there. It's just that they accrue to the Treasury and to the government in Kingdom. So that sort of figure that we've talked about, consistently in the past, potentially, $1.5 billion a year is available. It is just not available to Saudi Aramco or to the utility, but it absolutely is available to the Treasury there in KSA. So we think, given that they tend to be followers rather than innovators, that we've got a much higher chance of actually delivering success when we're showing that we're actually delivering MSAR and bio-MSAR at commercial scale to others in the marketplace. So that's the rationale for that. We've definitively not given up on any of those opportunities, be it KSA, be it Kuwait, Mexico, or Ecuador. Those are all there, but we think we've got a much better chance of progressing those once we've actually got this commercial success pushed through. And if I can just take a couple again, which are relating to the funding, there is, would we consider increasing the open offer if oversubscribed? We will answer this formally after this. I think probably not, and I'm not sure if we could, but if you don't mind just taking that as an interim answer, and we will definitively come back on that. And then there's one from Tim B about what was the specific need for the Bergen funding, given that you obtained institutional investor support so shortly afterwards. I think the issue there is, Tim, we were not certain that that would absolutely be the case, because at the time we took that Bergen funding, we hadn't actively started the funding process in terms of bringing investors over the wall to have our presentations with them. So it seemed to us a prudent approach at that point to get us through to the end of our current financial year and the middle of the current calendar year. And actually, I still think that's absolutely the right thing for us to have done at that point in time. And I think there's no doubt when we were having discussions with our institutional investors, the fact that our runway was leading out to the middle of this year did absolutely give them some comfort there. And
okay, Mike, you're doing the hard work. I need to give you
Jason, I don't know whether you want to pick up on on Maersk and
yeah, I was going to pick up, actually, that was the one I've got highlighted here. So there's a question here, is basically, please can you confirm if you're in discussions with Maersk regarding a trial on BioMSAR? And then there's a follow-up question about KSA, which Mike's already answered. So basically, yeah, we have spoken with Maersk about BioMSAR. However, I think it's important to stress that our immediate focus in the marine space is on the MSC, delivering the MSC deliverables, which are quite extensive in terms of looking at obviously various different vessels and routes and production, and there's quite a lot of work that needs to go on behind the scenes in terms of getting that project delivered, such that we're up in production by the end of this year, supplying vessels. So that's really our immediate focus. It focuses on MSC. There's some questions also about the where are we with the second marine contract, the contract with the bulk shipping company that we mentioned, or companies that we mentioned earlier. Those discussions are ongoing. Certainly, we had some very good sort of calls with one of the largest bulk shipping companies in the sector regarding BioMSAR as well. So, as the MSC production becomes known in terms of timelines and plans, etc., then obviously there's an opportunity for us to focus again on sort of progressing some of those other discussions in parallel. But yeah, we obviously, we're a small team, so we need to we have to be fairly fleet of foot and focus on the high priority customers, which are the top three, which I've presented earlier today. And with MSC, we also have the opportunity to then speak to the cruise shipping industry as well. So the cruise, sort of their cruise division, especially. So we think that MSC will keep us pretty busy, certainly the first half of this year, and our immediate focus is on them.
There are a couple relating to how quickly we can gear the business up, and I think if I can just come back on a couple of those things, and maybe Jason can sort of come in and provide some sort of supplementary detail as well. I think first of all, to clarify that we don't regard MMUs as very long lead items, so we don't need at this stage to be talking about going out and purchasing these on a speculative basis. We can actually use the existing two that we've got to really good effect. And as we progress things, we can look at bringing those on. And actually, we've also got the ability to use sort of external parties to actually operate these in situ. And that actually was done to very good effect when we were doing some of the work for the Maersk trial as well at CEPSA. So we don't see the need for us to be going out and spending lots of money on new MMUs, but we can certainly gear this business up very quickly, and it is highly operationally geared, which means that we don't need to significantly increase the sort of corporate and head office costs to do that.
There was a follow-up question from David E in terms of how long is a lead time for an MMU? Typically, these units are produced to supply the asphalt industry. So out of the asphalt season, generally the sort of lead time is around 3 months. as the asphalt season progresses, sometimes that can extend to maybe 4 or 5 in Europe. So, but there are a couple of suppliers that we deal with and we'll be dealing with going forward to sort of spread the burden as demand requires it. So, but that gives you a typical range. And then there was a question, I think, from Farrokh D, sort of asking me to clarify what I meant about the Cummins engine. Is it just for ships, or could it be used for generators as well? And if the latter, could you market it to companies like Aggreko? Good comment and an observation. The Cummins engine is used as a generator, so it's, for us, it was just a low cost means of doing an engine trial very quickly, but there was no risk of it. There was no surety that it would work as well as it did. But I guess the interest for us of trialing MSAR on, or bio MSAR especially, on smaller generators, is that it could be used as a sort of a portable power or semi sort of permanent power generation in a sort of a modular unit as well. So and obviously that's something that Aquafuel have a lot of experience in. Yes, we are looking at the potential power generation opportunity as well. Whether that's with Aggreko or anyone else obviously remains to be seen.
And Jason, I just wonder if you want to pick up. There's one from David D just saying, the circular speaks about the plans for the toll processor route for Morocco and MSC. Can you please provide the rationale for this as opposed to the licensing model? Is the tolling model higher risk?
We don't see the tolling model as higher risk at all, because that's our expertise is in sort of building and running these units. So we have a lot of experience already. Obviously, it has a higher return, and in certain, the tolling model has a higher return, I think, is shown in the economics that are presented. So for us, it gives us the highest potential return. And where certain clients may not have the money to invest, in the MSAR facilities for a licensing application, then for us to be able to offer that as an opportunity means that projects can get delivered sooner rather than later, and it's a good use of our 2 MMUs as well going forward. So another MMUs if we decide to invest in those. It's sort of a horses for courses answer, but it certainly, we don't view it as high risk, because this is what we do, and the companies that we work with are experienced in operating these units as well. Thanks,
Jason. If I can pick one here from Adam C. And Adam's basically, and I'll paraphrase this, saying, what other information did we give to institutional investors? Because the projects we talk about are all trials. Yes, they are, but we have absolutely divulged no more information to institutional investors than is included in this. And if I can therefore bring that back to another question that came in from Mark S, which is, in a sense, can I just sort of paraphrase it? It's the private investors and the retail investors that have actually helped this company survive. Can you make sure that you continue to prioritize us and that you don't forget about us now you've got institutional investors on board? I think, Mark, if you can just take it, the fact that we're absolutely doing this presentation now is, I think, a testament to the fact we are absolutely not going to do that. And we're providing you with exactly the same information that we gave to those institutional investors. And the sort of formal process is, the only inside information they had was in relation to the active work that we were undertaking on seeking to raise funding through a placing. Once that became published, they had no further inside information, therefore were able to participate in the funding. So you're in exactly the same positions as they are. And you've also asked, well, how do they think it's different than in the past? And I think it is because we've got this broad spread of activities across 3 different sort of user bases in the marine, the upstream and the industrial markets, together with all those opportunities we've talked about in the past as well, with the NOx in the likes of Ecuador, in Mexico and in the Middle East. But I think really importantly as well, what we're able to do with BioMSAR in terms of really engaging with the marketplace and actually getting not just a product out there in BioMSAR, but actually really igniting that interest in MSAR itself as well. as a precursor to then looking at bio-MSAR. So I think all of those things have really helped us and really struck a chord with these institutional investors. But absolutely, we will be continuing to regard all our investors as important to us, and that's why we're here talking to you now. There's one I would definitely like to sort of respond to from Mark S, who said, and I will read this out: will you be awarding yourselves bonuses for the recent fundraisers you did with Bergen? Bonuses should only be awarded for commercial contracts. Mark, we don't award ourselves bonuses. Any bonuses that are paid to the executives are under the control of the compensation committee. They're on terms that are sort of strictly reviewed by them and on the delivery of specific requirements put to us as the executive by them, and they're very demanding. So I can't answer the question as to whether we will be awarding anything to ourselves, because we absolutely don't do that. And any future awards of bonuses will be subject, of course, to you being able to scrutinise that at the annual general meeting, if any future awards have been made. Can I perhaps, Jason, just pick up one other as well? Because someone's asking about, you know, what certainty is there that MSC won't do what Maersk did? And I just wonder if you can sort of provide a bit of background there as to why it's very different now with MSC versus the timing with Maersk.
Yeah, I mean, with Maersk, well, firstly, we wouldn't have, you know, I think, you know, the work that we did in conjunction with Maersk and the OEMs, you know, was very, very beneficial in you know, providing all the necessary data that we've now utilised to get, you know, MSC on board. And essentially, what MSC are doing is they're committing, you know, some of their vessels, or a vessel or more, to operate on MSAR in a live commercial service. So that's a significant commitment for you know, some of these very large container ships, which are, you know, they've already invested several $1 million in each vessel, in each ship, on putting scrubbers on board. So that's a significant commitment for a shipping company to make, to trial the fuel, and it's only on the basis that the work we did with Maersk, you know, got to where it did. You know, why? There's a good question that came in. You know, why didn't Maersk progress? Well, the answer really was timing. You know, at the time when we were doing the trial, the IMO made a snap decision, which sort of put the marine industry in a bit of a funk in terms of what they were going to do. Maersk panicked, in our view, and sort of tried to steer the rest of the world to utilise low sulphur fuel, and they didn't see MSAR as a part of that. So we disagreed, and sort of worked with the companies, you know, the more progressive companies who are looking to put exhaust gas cleaning systems or scrubbers on board. They gave them full fuel flexibility, and really the savings with MSAR are highest when, you know, you can utilise a higher sulphur feedstock. So you know, that's really sort of really opened up the MSC opportunity. So yeah, in terms of Quantum, you know, they are soon to be, I think, the largest shipping company in the world. They certainly run a very large cruise division as well. So we can't really be too explicit in terms of the, you know, the opportunity in millions of tons a year of MSAR, but you know, they are substantial consumers of fuel oil for their fleet.
There are a couple more as well that have come in terms of the timing of the fundraise, and one from David G just saying, wouldn't it have been better to wait a couple of weeks? I think this is one of those things where always post-event, it's relatively easy to think about timing. I have to say, when we went into this, while we were really confident about what opportunities we had and our ability to deliver against them, what was actually really challenging was what response that would have in the marketplace. And I think when we spoke with our broker at the end of this process, they were very clear that we've hit a sort of a bit of a sweet spot in terms of timing. So we think it was absolutely the right time to go. There would be no definitive view that doing this in, you know, a month's time or a few weeks' time would have actually delivered a better result. It could have actually delivered a less positive result. Nothing to do with us, but just where the market might be at that point. So we absolutely think it was the right sort of timing for us. There are a couple, again, coming from Mark S regarding how can anyone, basically, I'll paraphrase it, but how can we trust the fact that you've said you'll get to where you are by June 2022 when you've never done that in the past? I think, Mark, it's up to you what you take out of this. All we can do is give you our confidence that this broad spread of activities we've got now puts us in the strongest possible position that we've ever been in to actually get where we are going to go. And we ourselves have got absolute confidence that we'll be able to deliver against that. If you don't believe that's the case, then we've just got to try harder to actually convince you that that absolutely is the case. And if I can perhaps just, again, I'm not going to read out the detail of it, but Mark is basically indicating that he doesn't believe the board of directors is investing enough in the company. Again, that's got to be a personal point of view in terms of anyone on the board, but I think with the exception of one of our non-executive directors, everyone is actually participating in the placing or the open offer, and for at least following their rights, and in many instances significantly looking to invest further funds. We are personally well invested in the company, and we only really share in that success if we're able to deliver it for you, our loyal retail shareholders as well. So we think we are doing absolutely the right thing. We think we're putting our money behind it. If for whatever reason you think there's not enough of it, I'm afraid that's got to be where we are now. We believe we've got a great story. We're putting our funding in there to demonstrate that. If that is not as much as you believe we should be doing, I'm sorry, but that's where we are at the minute, and we are absolutely focused on delivering for you, our loyal shareholders, and also for our new institutional shareholders as well. Helen H came back with just a quick one, a 3-point still on board, and Jason, if you want to just very briefly sort of confirm that.
Yeah, very much so. We're in regular dialogue with 3 points, specifically on some of the projects in the Americas. Yeah, no, definitely they're definitely on board. There was another question as well, I think, with regards to a pre-submitted question came in terms of have there been any discussions with potential clients identified through our partners, Energy and Petroleum Consultants. The answer is yes. We've have a number of discussions that are ongoing in sort of Central America as a result of our agents there, who are former colleagues of mine in Petroleum de Venezuela.
Can I just take one, and I'll answer first, Jason, and then you from John R, which is, how are you both feeling about the company? 1 is bad, 10 is great. I'm a good 9.5 at the minute, I think, at least. Always room for a bit of improvement, but yeah, very, very positive about the business and our ability to deliver on things. Yeah,
and I'll give you a steady 9, not quite 9.5, but yeah, I'm at the coalface.
There have been, again, I think, a couple of things about Adam C saying, we're saying that BioMSAR is a game changer, and that we've said that about MSAR in the past, and why hasn't this been taken up? And I think hopefully we've given you a bit of an overview of that, which is we're talking about hugely conservative industries here, both in terms of production and consumption. And I think the real thing that has changed is, if we look back even, I guess, 18 months, 2 years, our biggest competitor has always been the client doing nothing, because that's an easy option for any client. Just do nothing. I'll just keep doing what I'm doing, because that doesn't, to their mind, if it costs them anything. Well, I think what has happened over the last 12 to 18 months in particular is effectively taken that do nothing option away from the clients, because that is really not possible for them anymore. So once they then start to having a look at doing something, that's when our solution really becomes really exciting, because there isn't anything else out there that's applicable to this. There's nothing that they can do which would give them the same sort of uplift if they're a refiner, seeking to really improve their refinery profitability and reduce their overproduction of HFO than MSAR technology, it would either cost them considerably more, it would take them much longer to do, and I'm talking about sort of multiples, so not within 1 year, but potentially 3 to 5 years, and they would all increase CO2 output. So, they're all taking them in the opposite direction. This is the one solution that can actually take them there and do it very quickly. So I think that is something that really is quite different about where we are now versus where we might have been 18 months or so ago as well.
Just to add to that, I mean, I think that's an important feature that the institutional investors we spoke to a week or so ago now, picked up on as well. So some of those institutions we've spoken to, over a number of years, they've seen the company, not necessarily invested, but I think the world is changing. I think we're very well positioned with our product to take advantage of the ESG pressures that we're facing many companies that combined with the economic savings of MSAR, the environmental benefits of equal benefit now, rather than just a nice to have in the past. So the world is changing, positively for us, we believe.
I think we're probably getting to the point now where we maybe just look at another couple of questions now. As I said, we are really diligent in terms of following up and making sure that all the questions that aren't just sort of repeats are actually answered and put up on the Investor Meet Company website. So please don't take it that we're not actually going to be answering these. We will do our best to answer every single one. But I think a couple that I would like to sort of pick up is, wait a minute, it's because can I just perhaps, Jason, one of these is what are we doing about the sort of further opportunities with other renewable elements of bio-MSAR and the sort of work that we'll be looking to do on that?
Yeah, I guess that's picking up on an article that I did recently in Motorship as well. Yeah, I mean, lignin is one of the renewable fuels that's available. That's certainly very abundant in the world as a feedstock. There are various forms of lignin that you can utilise. The basic form is the solid form, which is widely spread. It comes from essentially from wood-based products. So yeah, we're looking at various different forms of lignin as a possibility of combining that in MSAR going forward, plus some other renewable components as well. And I think what's also important, which we're working on at the moment, is trying to, because there's lots of different biofuels out there, is trying to quantify and classify sort of bio-MSAR and how that compares with other sort of decarbonisation strategies, so that sort of bio-MSAR is also on the roadmap, as well as MSAR in the sector. So obviously looking to try and educate the space that we work in as well, where there are certain parties out there in institutions which are not that well versed in MSAR yet, but are very, very interested in learning more. So we need to educate the various sort of stakeholders in the industries which we serve, which we're doing reasonably effectively, obviously with a small team. So yeah, I think further work is needed in that regard, but yeah, certainly on the renewable space, we think there's very good scope for incorporating some of these products into a water-based solution.
Thanks, Jason. And I think with that, if I can just make a couple of sort of closing remarks before handing back to Paul, I think, as I said, we will go through all of these, and I hope, and this is directly to Mark S, but also to everyone here, that we don't take your support as read. We actually realise that some of you have got significant investment in this business, and we realise that for whatever reason you've disappointed in our historic performance, and clearly we wouldn't have wanted to end up where we ended up in terms of the success or otherwise of some of the projects we've delivered. But we've also always been really honest with you about, we've only given you where we think we are going to get on these things. We've never done anything other than do that. We think are very open in terms of responding to questions that are, quite challenging to us. And we hope that you at least appreciate that we are responding positively to those. What we hope we can do as we continue through the course of this year is that we are able to show you that we can deliver these projects, and we'll deliver them successfully and then migrate to commercial contracts. The proof of the pudding is going to be us actually delivering that, and we absolutely understand that. But we are absolutely committed to doing that, and we are very, very confident about our ability to exactly deliver against that. So thank you very much, everyone. We hope you found it helpful. We will, of course, be coming back to use this channel as appropriate, with updates in terms of either our forthcoming interim results or other announcements that we make in due course. But thank you very much, everyone, for taking the time and effort to attend the meeting, and also for taking the time and effort to submit your questions.
Fantastic. Mike, Jason, thank you very much for addressing those questions you can. And as Mike said, they will review all the questions submitted today, and we'll publish those responses back on the Investor Meet Company platform where appropriate to do so. Mike, thanks again for summing up there. But thank you both for updating investors today. Could I ask investors not to close this session, as you will now automatically be redirected for the opportunity to provide your feedback. If you've accessed this meeting from our website, the feedback page will appear in front of you. If you've accessed via the link sent in the email, you'll simply be asked to log back in to provide your feedback. Please do take a couple of minutes to do so. Your views and expectations are appreciated by the company. On behalf of QUADRISE Fuels, thank you very much indeed for attending today's presentation. That concludes today's session.